And we are live. So if you are a customer experience professional looking to deliver a rock star customer experience to your customers, then you are in the right place, because today I'm going to be talking to Joseph Michelli, and we're going to be talking about the sweet spot between technology and human service. With the power of the internet, we should be able to talk to Joseph now. So can you hear me, mate? Are you there?
I am here, James. Lovely to be here.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Well, look, I'm imagining most people watching this are going to know who you are, but maybe there are some people that don't. Introduce yourself a little bit. Tell them who you are and what you're about.
I am this amazingly lucky guy who had the opportunity to work with some fabulous brands over my career, starting with a tiny little fish market in Seattle, Washington, where they literally throw fish, and then working with brands like Starbucks and the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company and Zappos, a shoe company here in the United States, and then on to brands in healthcare, and then out to working in the Mercedes-Benz world and quite a few other clients that I haven't written about over the course of my career. So that's who I am. I've written books about most all those brands I just referenced, and we've had some modicum of success in that space.
Brilliant. So look, I mean, you've got loads of really, really good clients on your list. It's kind of like, it reads like a who's who of brands in the world. So when you're working with these guys, what problems are they facing when they're trying to differentiate what they do, when they're trying to differentiate with their customer experience?
Well, I think the problem is the one that everyone's facing right now, which is they understand that products have a limited bandwidth of differences. So, today, with the democratization of everything through the internet and with interconnectivity the way it is, you can have a great product, and an hour later, a competitor is coming up with an ability to match or have parity on the benefits and attributes of that product. So if you're going to win in the world today, you have to deliver that product in a different way in the marketplace, and you have to infuse your brand personality. I mean, James, you have personality in spades, and to take that personality and then say, how does that show up in every single contact point, and particularly, let's say, in a large brand where it's not James all the time, maybe, who's delivering against it, but everyone who represents that brand has the opportunity to bring the personality of the brand to life. So branded personality delivery is probably one of the greatest challenges, and figuring out how to do it with such consistency to meet the wants, needs, and desires of customers like your competitors can.
That's cool. I mean, I want to talk to you more about, firstly, thank you for the compliment. But I want to talk to you about this brand personality idea. How do you define a brand personality? I mean, I don't mean like a dictionary definition. I mean, like, if you're a company and you don't feel you have one, what do you do? How do you sit down with a blank piece of paper and then end up with a brand personality?
Well, first off, you have to accept that that's important, right? I mean, many brands have hidden their personality under a rock, right? Because they don't want, with personality comes the ability to attract people and the risk of detracting people, right? So some people may say, wait, James is a little too rock star for me. We're not going to associate with him, right? Like, he's a little too big of a personality. We want something a little bit more serene and contained and mellow. And so if you want to play the middle, then you're never going to get that piece of paper out and express a personality. And many brands will never be loved and they'll never be hated. They'll just be tolerated, right? I mean, there's a sense of nothingness there. So figuring out that you need a personality to attract people is the first step. And then secondarily, personalities have attracted people for time immemorial. I mean, we attract people based on personality. So it's understanding the range of personalities that brands might express. And the classic strategy, the most simple and classic strategy, is to do brand archetype work, where you'll take an archetype, one of those characters from history, the hero, the villain, the average guy, whatever it might be, and you look at your brand through the lens of those various personalities and say, what's realistic for me? I mean, for you, James, if you just try to play the average guy or the naive, it would not play well with your brand, right? So you've got to play kind of more of a maverick or other elements of your brand in order to know who you are and kind of be authentic to your basic DNA. So one of it is to, get your piece of paper out and say, what can you credibly be? What is relevant to your market? what is unique to you and what is likely to be durable, because a personality isn't something you should put on every morning differently. What's going to be something that's sustainably attractive to audiences over time?
Yeah,
I call it the crud test, by the way, James. Credible, relevant, unique, and durable. Crud. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, well, you know what? Let me save that other question. Talk me through that again, each step. And imagine I'm starting out from scratch and I've come to you and I've said, Joseph, teach me how to do this. Walk me through each step. How would I go about doing it through the credibility?
Sure. Well, let's start with credibility. Let's start with that. I mean, if I said, James, what can you credibly lay claim to that most people can't credibly lay claim to? Most people can't. And then we'd say, well, I've been a rock musician for a period of my life. Well, that's true. Most people can't actually claim that. How could that be relevant to an audience? I mean, how do you take being a rock star in a music context and make it relevant to groups who are trying to deliver experiences? Well, Joseph, I happen to have created experiences on stage in a very specific kind of event mindset. What if we could take that experiential creation and elongate it out of an event and make it throughout the customer journey? Okay, now we're getting somewhere. And what is unique about you? Well, we just so happen to be we used to be award-winning musicians. So, and award-winning, now we're not just in a group of, and if we get even more specific and we say something like, I'm a New York Times best-selling author, now I've eliminated all these other best-selling authors who may very well have been the best-selling author in their small town with one bookstore and all their friends purchased it. Right now I can distinguish even further into the uniqueness of my space. And then I ask myself, is this going to last? Can you sell this for any extended period of time? Do people have an attraction to rock stars? Do they have an attraction to the energy and dynamism of the music world? Or are you anchoring yourself to a star that no one's going to actually reach for? And the answer is quite simply rock star customer experience. Voila. And even, you've got all these fabulous guests who join you, present company excluded, of course.
No, I think that's an amazing way to look at it. To go through that sort of process, and that's the thing, really, isn't it? Because like you could have this sort of brand archetype in your mind, but if the credibility isn't there, it's not going to be authentic. It's not going to be genuine, and people aren't going to sort of relate with it that well. So when it comes to a brand archetype, you said talk about certain people in history. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that? Because that sounded really interesting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think about mythology, stories we've heard in mythology. I think of the power of story and the kinds of things that make for great stories. If we can cull out of all of that and think about what is it in our personality that connects to some great story of history, maybe it's an underdog story, a challenger story. Maybe it's this hero story of somebody who comes and takes on the evil, the challenge, the complacency, the negative service that exists in an industry. Maybe it's a complete disruptor story of somebody who doesn't really challenge so much. They just don't think like most people think, and they offer solutions that meets the wants and needs of customers that are not otherwise being created. It's a Steve Jobs kind of personality. And so once you have that, and then you start layering that into all of the touch points that matter most to your customers. So you have to really do the customer journey mapping, which is a part of the technology of our industry. But you don't have to control every single contact point with your brand, your customer. You just have to make sure your brand personality shows up at those high value contact points in their consideration phase, in their decision making to buy phase, in their actual purchase phase, in the call to SQL phase. Just some key deliverables of your brand are particularly important.
Yeah, that's a nice way to think about being able to do that, and of course always having that thing to go back to. So I mean, other than that, you mentioned earlier about making sure that your brand personality basically shows up in everything you do. Are there any other ways that you can go about making sure that your brand personality is embedded in your processes, your systems, in every employee? Like, does it really have to come down to informing every little thing that you do, or can it be more of just like a macro idea that sort of filters down? Like,
Well, I think there's both. I mean, it's both. The culture is a lot about that macro idea and making sure that you understand it and you try to bring that alive in the people that you work with. For me, literally, I do brand inventory asset work. So I go around and I look at every single way in which your brand interfaces. So it might be through live video. It might be through your website. It's your emails. I look at every way in which you have interaction with potential customers or customers. And then within that context, I'm always looking for, well, what are the high frequency contact points in that inventory? And then what are the high impact contact points? Because you may have a high frequency that has low impact, or you may have a low frequency activity that has high impact when you interact with customers. So I kind of look at that scenario and say, okay, we really need to make sure that we're delivering in this full suite of contact points, but we need to make sure that in the high impact contact points or the super high frequency contact points, our brand is present. So there's a strategic, tactical approach to inventorying all your contact points. As for culture and hiring and all these other things are very important as well, because that's the way in which people interact with your brand, through people, process, and technology.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. I'm completely behind that now. I'm with you on it. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad you brought it up, actually, because it's a really cool way to think about who you are as a company and where you're going. So you've really championed this idea of there being a difference between customer experience and customer centricity. In your mind, what is the difference between the two?
Oh my gosh, people use these terms interchangeably and they're just not the same thing. I mean, I know brands that care a lot about the customer experience, but don't care, that are not customer centric. So let me be very clear about this. Customer centricity is everything you do with a mindset of helping your customer be successful. That means that sometimes you won't even bring out a product because it won't help the customer be successful. It means at times you'll make decisions that customers will never, ever even consider or even be aware of that were in their best interest. So this is a mindset. Now, when you get, and it's strategy, it's strategic. It says, if I keep driving the success of my customer, I will be successful. Ultimately, that it has to be a fundamental belief. Now, here's what customer experience is. It is the interface between the customer and your brand, and it's where you show up in the customer's mind. So the way most customers will conclude that you're customer centric or not is based on their interactions with you, the things that they are aware of. So the way in which we can influence a perception of being customer centric is through the experiences we deliver. But that doesn't mean we're actually behaving such. And you'll see a lot of brands get caught where they're, Facebook may be an example of that, where people are saying, were you really customer centric? It seemed like you created a great user experience, but were you customer centric? Did you care about my privacy, my safety? Were you making decisions that I was unaware of that were in the best interest of me or you? And so ultimately, that's the distinction I like to make. True brands have customer centricity as their strategy. They pay off that strategy tactically by improving the people, process, and technologies that face the customer.
Right. I want to talk to you about the whole Facebook thing, which is quite interesting because I think maybe people in the industry look at what has gone on maybe in a different way. Now, I'm fully aware that because I don't pay for the product, I am the product. And the guys at the top of Facebook probably, and I don't know this for certain, probably don't necessarily think of the user, the person that creates the profile, as the customer, because that's not necessarily where the money's coming from. So would you say that Facebook either is a customer-centric company but don't class the actual user as the customer, or isn't a customer-centric company at all?
Well,
they don't.
I think that's lovely. I mean, I think the problem is when you start getting too fine-tuned on what humans and customers are, you can get very complicated about it, right? I mean, so oftentimes in B2B, where you're serving a business and a business serves the customers, there's really question, is the middle B that you're serving your customer, or is it the end consumer? We get a lot of confusion around this issue. I think the key here is that customer value, right? I mean, that's what we're always looking at, is what is the value to a customer? So from the standpoint of someone like yourself or myself who might use Facebook, The value for us is the ability to have a platform for which to communicate through, right? And then the question becomes, well, the value to Facebook of all of us is the ability to aggregate all of these eyeballs and be able to put content for their advertisers into it. So at the end of it all, you know what I ultimately believe is that Facebook did not tell all of their customers how they generated value. And they let that be kind of under the radar. So whether or not they viewed you as a customer or people whose names got sold and targeted for political advertising, the end of the day, all of those people were not advised of how value was being generated. If you'd have told most people that their names would be used upon completion of a survey for political targeting, those people may have chosen not to engage on the platform for fear that the value exchange was something less than was in their interest. So anyway, I love those debates, but I think at the end of it all, it is about not being transparent to whatever customer it is in order to gain value from a company perspective.
Yeah, I think I probably agree with that. Now, it brings me on to something else, which I'd really like your opinion on. So I don't know if I'm the first person to have said this, but I don't think I've necessarily seen something else. I may have done, and it's subliminally influenced me. I don't know. Maybe you can tell me. But I don't believe that there are any B2B companies. I believe there are only B2C companies. However, some companies have got more B's in the middle than others. So you might be a B2B to B to B to C company. And it's about sometimes understanding the needs and the outcomes of that final end user and making sure that everything's aligned along the way. So what I kind of want to know from you is, number one, am I right or am I wrong? And number two, why?
Well, I think, you're close to what someone else once said, which is that the customer, is the one who signs the paycheck, right? So the one who pays. So that's the end consumer. Because even in a B2B, normally the only way that middle B is able to pay you for your services is thanks to the end consumer. So there is that kind of thinking. I must tell you, I tend to look at it a little bit differently. I mean, I source a lot of B2Bs. So often I'm just saying, how do I help you as a company be successful? How do I do that? Now, if it turns out in the process of doing that, I see you not trying to be customer centric, right? Like you're not committed to helping your customers, I choose not to work with those clients. I mean, it's just big. I mean, there have been times in my career where people come in and say, this is the year of the customer at our company. Can you come and help us? And I'm like, well, what was you at last year? Like the year of the pizza? I mean, I don't understand. I mean, if you don't have your customer as the center of your business every single year, my coming in this year is just window dressing, and it's absolutely going to send a message that you have an initiative that you have no heart behind. So, I mean, I think I fundamentally agree with you in the when rubber meets the road. But what I also think is my job is to help the person in front of me be successful, which normally means helping their end customers be successful. Thus, those customers are loyal and referral sources back to that business. So I think we speak the same language ultimately. I just know that I have a lot of work to do in companies often to help them be effective on behalf of their customer. Because it could be me that is their customer someday, right? So it's always selfish in the end, right?
Totally get that, definitely. So if we take it a bit more to the topic, because I've taken it off topic a little bit. I tend to do that. So a lot of leaders at the moment, they're going to be looking at a lot of customer experience stuff, a lot of customer service stuff, a lot of process stuff. And a lot of the noise out there is about technology. And of course, there are a lot of leaders out there that are trying to understand different technologies and implement different technologies. But things are moving so quickly that by the time you've understood and implemented one technology, it's outdated and there's something else in there ready to take its place. How do leaders cope with that speed of change?
Well, first off, I think you just brilliantly said in this instance, because technology is a tool It is not an end unto itself. And if you get too in love with the tools, as soon as you take them out of the box, you have to have another tool because it's outdated. So the ultimate goal, I think, of technology is to understand that you have to have a strategy that creates value for people. And once you understand what that strategy is, then you can make sound decisions about how to make this happen. So for me, for example, a big part of most of the strategies that we implement across the brands is to fulfill needs, to make things easier, and then ultimately to infuse that branded customer experience in ways that bring joy to the lives of those served in a distinctive way. So, technology plays a very important role in the effort and ease dimension of those three components, right? It doesn't always fulfill the need, but it frequently makes the need easier to be fulfilled. And so understanding the use of technology in that one dimension of your strategic customer experience is particularly critical. But overvaluing technology in place of a well thought through strategy is just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, the thing that stands out for me is talking about customer need, and not everybody thinks like this, but when you're talking about customers, you say need. You don't say what they want, you say need. And it reminds me of something that you said earlier about sometimes giving customers solutions that maybe they wouldn't think were in their best interest, but actually are. Giving them delivering something that they don't even know that they need, which is something that's really interesting to me. And the way I think about it, and the people that have seen me before will know this analogy, but it's like if you ask a kid what they want to eat, they're going to say like gummy bears, ice cream, cookies, all on top of a pizza. Whereas realistically, as a parent or a guardian, you know what they need, and that's something different. But delivering on that something different is going to achieve a better outcome than delivering that diabetes pizza. So, how is it that you go about understanding what customers really need and differentiating it away from what they might just say that they want?
Well, first and foremost, I'm too hungry now to answer your question in light of the description of that food product. And just to echo it for a second before I answer, it was Henry Ford who said that had I asked customers, they would have asked for a faster horse, right? I mean, all in their conceptualization at the time was a horse, and they wanted an iterative improvement on what they knew. So his articulation, I think for most of us who spend our time in this, is to think about the question behind the question. So if I said, why do you want a faster horse? They would say, because I don't like spending as much time trying to get to where I go. So why don't you like that, right? And you ask that why question a few times, and before you know it, you're uncovering need behind the stated want. And that multiple levels of why, and you start to see why I want to be there as fast as I possibly can. Okay, well, let's start thinking of what is possible. What is possible in the creation of speed? It's, it goes beyond what is likely or what is probable. What is possible? And then how do we invest in creating solutions for those possibilities? And that's where innovation comes from. We wanted to be connected to information at all times. Thus, we ended up with, the internet, or we ended up with an iPhone that enables us to connect the internet as a very functional networking device. So, I think that's where you start to move. And if I look at the brands that I work with, and frankly, I've been so blessed on brands. We'll have a new book out next year about a super disruptor that, everyone knows about. And it's been one of those brands that, has really changed an industry. It's because those brands have taken the time to say what has been the want has a deeper need, and the way the want has been met has not been the most efficient, long-term visionary way to make that happen. And so these brands stepped in and they created a solution, and everybody else was caught with their flat-footed in terms of the solutions that they had.
I think it's a great way to think about it, and I'm mega excited about the new book as well. And it reminds me of one of the things is we've kind of approached customer experience with an industrial age mindset, and we come at a lot of things with an industrial age mindset because, of course, most of the things that we use have been forged in the industrial age, and a lot of those ideas are about like continually improving what you're already doing. And again, if you were to ask a customer what they want, they tend to say more for less money, faster. That tends to be like, you pretty much get that. And I saw something a while back, and it was saying like the light bulb wasn't invented by continuously improving the candle. Sometimes you do need to step back and understand what is the outcome this thing is delivering, and then what are other ways we can go about doing that. And of course, nowadays with more technology, that's becoming like, I don't want to say easier, but we're getting a lot more opportunities to go at things. But of course, there is still that core of people out there that are saying they still want this old-fashioned, as I say old-fashioned, I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but like an old-fashioned service from people. So for you and the work you've done and the amazing brands you've worked with, how do you find that sweet spot between adopting new technologies and keeping that human touch?
Well, and again, you say things that just need to be reacted to. So let me first and foremost say I'm an old guy. So, in my early days, when I first started to run into lean technologies, for example, I used to think, wow, this is so fabulous. But then as I worked on it for a while, there were many practitioners who didn't understand anything other than operational excellence and efficiencies, and they would strip out all customer value. It was like efficient and iterative and improving, but if it meant at a hotel like a Ritz-Carlton, they would say that those flowers in the foyer are waste. We can save X number of dollars. Well, yeah, but they're waste from a pure ROI, logical, iterative sense. But at some point, they're a transitional emotional piece for people. And to remove those takes away some of the aesthetic of the place. And it's hard to put value on that aesthetic. It's harder to create value than it is to remove inefficiencies, I guess is the end of that. So to go to the same with regard to technology and people, efficiencies of technology are amazing, but they don't always create value, particularly when it comes to saying to a customer, you're appreciated, you are special, I can't wait to see you. Those kinds of values that people have, the value of being understood, wanted, appreciated, having somebody excited about your existence, technology is yet to replicate any of that. And so if you strip it all away and you don't put people, particularly as an opt-in option for humans, I mean, people may want to opt in for technologies without any human contact for a long period of time, but if they opt human, then the humans who step in had better understand what makes us different, at least for now, from artificial intelligence and machine learning. And that often comes down to the warmth through which the experience is delivered.
I like the idea of opt human, like to give people like, like what's your contact preference nowadays? But in the future, it could be, well, what's your experience preference? And again, that's not something that process mindset that we spoke about, the industrial age mindset, would come to, because again, it's that predominantly there's a mindset of standardization when it comes to that thing. So if you're producing a product, you need the process to be standard. You need it to be the same every single time. You need the outcome, the output to be the same every single time. But of course, coming to like a customer world, every single customer is different, and every single experience will be experienced different every single time, even by the same customer. So do you feel that technology has got a big role to play in the personalization of experiences, even if the outcome is then that human interaction?
Oh, and this is where, the Facebook argument might come back all full circle, right? Because if I can personalize ads to you based on what I've learned from you from AI and machine learning, then now suddenly I can curate content that's really specific to you and not expose you to mindless ads about, products that you would never have an interest in. Right. So to me, there is a very powerful role of technology to help us personalize service delivery, preference information. I mean, look, the Ritz-Carlton has been trying to figure this out through humans for the longest time. I'll bring you a 6-pack of Coke to your room as an amenity item, and I look at how many of them did you drink, and having drank none, the next time I'm going to make sure there's no Coca-Cola presented in your room, right? It's a inferential learning. Well, what if from a machine learning, we can do all of those sorts of things and save us having to guess around forever? But when the person does deliver the product to your room, whatever it is that we know you like based on your AI-based preferences, then we can deliver it in a very human way, and even be encouraged with prompts on the kinds of things that would make you enjoy it even more. I know that this sounds so creepy Orwellian, but at some level, I think most of us we have so little time. We don't want to be exposed to all this stuff that has absolutely no possibility of engaging our attention, interests, or wants and desires. So let's use advanced learning to do that, but then let's humanize its experience.
I like that because it makes me think, well, you know what? You are right. People like Facebook are using all of this data on us to make every single one of our experiences completely different. No two people will ever have the same experience when they log on to Facebook. It's completely different every time. Now imagine if the hotel could sort of team up and get that data to learn that I'm a Pepsi guy and you're a Coke guy.
Right.
I'm a vegan. I'm not. Or like you're on a specific like low carb diet or something. Imagine you could do that and then only have that. How cool would that be? You are right, though. I think like some people would find that creepy, but as it moves on, do you think?
Well, the other piece though is it's always, humans are so confusing. Like I'll be on a low carb diet, and then the next thing you know, I'll be eating is carbs. I'll have a pasta revenge attack. And so I think that the challenge often is that people, though creatures of habit and have great pattern behavior, which AI and machine learning can actually help you with, there's also the nuances of human switches. And so I go from one preference or interest to another, and how quickly can the technology catch up to that, whereas people might be able to notice those subtle nuances fairly swiftly as well. So I just think there's a place for both, and any brand that ultimately gets over reliant on one or the other probably is going to fail, because we want online, we want offline. We don't really care about those things as consumers. We just know that when we choose something, we want the brand to show up with a solution that's in keeping with what we were expecting at the time. And I'll give you a quick example. There's a retailer here in the United States, a big box retailer. They've got an app where I no longer have to stand in line to check out. I just scan my own items. I love that in that particular interaction. But there's another store I would go to that I really love interacting with the people. So if they went to the app, I'd feel a sense of disappointment. So, I think it's so tricky to do. And that's why it takes human beings to help engineer and design these things on behalf of other human beings, and not simply leave it to the technologists to figure out what are the best algorithms.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing. There's no black and white answer, is there? There's no way of saying this is the best way to do it, because of course everybody's got different customers, and it really is about understanding the types of customers you've got, the types of customers you want, understanding who they are as people, understanding their expectations, their needs, their successful outcomes, and then designing your experiences to deliver on those things. Whereas I think a lot of companies do fail because they look at people who are in the industry known for good customer experience. They try and just copy their experiences, but it's not right for them. It's not right for their brand. It's not right for their customers. Do you think that it's ever going to get to a place, though, where the overwhelming expectation from customers is to have that level of personalization, and when it doesn't occur, there's going to be backlash? Do you think we'll ever get to a place like that?
Oh, yeah, and absolutely. And really, here's the ultimate sentence, I think. All business is personal. The problem for brands is it gets very impersonal, because you do the same thing over and over and over again, and then they become consumers. And the moment you switch into that mindset of a very pedestrian, transactional relationship, that's when you're going to lose those former people who were customers. And so I think that we are all expecting brands to take the time to get to know us, to understand us, to meet us where we are, and not expect us to go around the axle to find them wherever they are, to do business their way from their side of the counter, lacking the technologies that we find relevant to our lives and our lifestyles. And so in the end, we're all expecting brands to figure us out, deliver against who we are, make messaging relevant, and also make it warmly, lovingly, authentically human. And I think, what a great challenge. What a great time in history to live.
Definitely. Well, it's definitely exciting. So I've read things from you before where you talk about customer value, and you refer to noble customer value. Can you explain to me a little bit more what that is?
Oh my gosh, there are people making bad profits every single day. The cellular carriers who sell you minutes and then don't roll those minutes over into the next month. Or you're in a plan that's way over what you need and they never right size your plan. Yes, they create value in that you have those minutes available should you ever want them up to the end of the month. But beyond that, they really are not generating success for me. They're making short-term success for themselves based on the complacency of consumers. They are really not looking out for the consumer's best interest. And so for me, noble value is the understanding that you can take money from me today copiously and milk me dry, or you can provide me services that warrant legitimate profit for you. I want good profit for you. I want you to be around. So noble value is the generation of good profit in a sustained relationship on behalf of the success of the customer.
I'm with you. So to parallel that, recently I had a phone call from GoDaddy. You know who GoDaddy are? I
do.
Figured you might. Of course, and I've got a ton of domains, a ton of different emails. In this business, you tend to amass them and accumulate them over time.
Yes.
And I got a phone call and I was like, okay, what's this all about? I figured, they're going to be trying to sell me extra things, this, that, and the other. And the guy on the phone said, you've got 3 domains that are coming up for renewal. We just wanted to make sure that you still needed them. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, if you don't need them, we'll stop them from renewing because they're down to auto renew. And I was like, you know what? How cool is that as a company for them to call up and try and take less money from me? And I thought, as a customer, forget the being in the customer experience world, but as a customer, I was like, you know what? It's very unlikely I'm going to put my business elsewhere after that. But I know that as a customer. But as going into a business as a consultant or an advisor or a mentor, how would you have passed that idea through their CFO? How would you have?
Well, it's nightmarish, but I think a lot more CFOs are aware of customer experience value today than they were maybe a decade ago. But normally what I'll say is, look, having worked with Zappos, a shoe company in the United States, who literally, if you were to call up and try to order shoes that they don't have in stock, they will not take your credit card if they don't have them in stock. Instead, they'll look in their competitor's website. They'll determine if it's likely that the competitor has them in stock. They'll send you an email with the URL. They'll send you a bounce back coupon saying, sorry, we didn't have them in stock. Should you purchase from us again? This coupon will be useful. They never send coupons except in instances of service breakdowns. To be able to demonstrate that coupon has redemption rates that are 10 times what a normal bounce back coupon would have is what I tend to show, this kind of data points that say, look, yes, you gave up a sale today. You sent the customer to somewhere else where they could get their need met and you lost that revenue. But guess what? That customer came back to you with a coupon that they should have never, ever used, because it's much like taking milk out of your refrigerator, drinking it, finding out it's spoiled and putting it back in for another day, right? I mean, these brands did not deliver in that first instance, but somehow I'm willing to go and re-engage them because guess what? It was less about the sale. It was more about my success. And so I just use examples, and frequently CFOs go, all right, I don't want to take the risk of burning a customer's lifetime value. And we also do lots of lifetime value calculations. It's hard and costly to acquire new customers. So why not, for GoDaddy, retain you as opposed to burning you over $9.99 renewal rate US, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it. Look at it past that interaction. Look at the other interactions that may come as a result of it. Like, for example, if I then went, oh no, actually I didn't want that, and then have to ring up and try, that's going to cost money as well. Looking at the lifetime value of the customer. I mean, for you, there's lots of different ways of calculating a lifetime value of a customer. Have you come across like a solid way that you think is probably the best way to do it, or is it different?
I think there's always assumptions. I mean, you have to look at what is the typical life cycle of a customer with you. So what is the traditional trajectory of visits, and what is the cost per visit, if you will? And then you have to say, if we were to lose the customer, say in their first purchase, and their normal purchase cycle is 2 years and their normal amount of money past the first purchase, what is our risk of loss? And I think, there are lots of other ways to calculate this, but the important consideration is once we've got you on board, once I've already sold to you, like I've sold to you, you are a buyer now. You're no longer a prospect. I'm considering yours. I have bought it. And if now upon purchase, you can't just take me down a path of further purchasing or continued purchasing, as opposed to getting you over that objection to buy, it's huge to get somebody to say yes to your product. And once they have, it's really up to you to give them reasons to just continue to stay with you instead of have to find somebody else who they have to work through objections with. Yeah. So I have many calculators for lifetime value, but what I'm really most shocked by is when people have never calculated it. That's the one where I go into business and go, what's the lifetime value of your customer? And they go, I really don't know. I just, they shop with us for quite a while and we like it. And then you're like, really? How do you make a decision on a return? Like if I know you're a high value customer of my brand, I'm going to give you much more liberal return policies, more benefits, more perks, more rewards to keep you in relationship with me than somebody else I'm trying to pull into that level of purchasing.
I think it's really interesting to think about it that way. And it really sort of, it sticks in my brain a little bit. And when you talk about lifetime value and then a value proposition, it makes me think about something I read of yours a little while back. And you were talking about value proposition and you were sort of comparing Facebook and Apple, the one I'm talking about.
Right. Oh, I do. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to talk too much about Facebook. This has turned into quite a Facebook-centric conversation. But in your opinion, what are the main differences when it comes to a value proposition between Apple and Facebook?
Well, first it gets to how do you create value? There's a million ways to create value. Okay, maybe I have 30 of them that I've listed over my lifetime, but there are things like shared value. So now you buy an object like a car and you share it through Uber value, or you buy an apartment or a house and you share it through Airbnb kind of value. Yeah. That's functionally sharing value. There is service-based value. This is what you and I do in a consultative way. There is product value where we create a tangible good and we put it to the market. There's resale value where somebody creates a tangible good, you distribute it to market. I mean, there's all kinds of value. And so Apple creates product-based value for the most part. It is a product that has tangible benefits for someone. Steve Jobs was masterful at telling a story around what the benefits of those attributes were to your lifestyle. And so he could take a product and make it a lifestyle brand, but it's a product. And then Facebook was selling audience aggregation value, which said, we're going to aggregate audiences, we're going to learn about those audiences, and we're going to target marketing to those audiences. And all value is important to customers. If you don't have it, you can't have a business. I often say businesses are creating value, finding the audience and marketing the value to the audience that will find it, delivering the value you promised, being able to sell that value that you've promised, and ultimately financing your business so that it's worth keeping in action. So for me, value is understanding all those possible value streams and sometimes merging them, taking a service value and turning it into a book. That becomes service to product value.
Yeah, it's a cool way to look at it and look at it beyond the traditional lens of value and asking sort of which different areas. So I really like that. And that's super, super interesting to me. It sort of brings me on to the next thing I wanted to talk to you about. And when it comes to customer experience, a lot of people try and approach customer experience with the mindsets that they've had for many, many years. So there's people that talk about lean in customer experience and Six Sigma in customer experience and lots of different ways. But I've seen you write about Agile customer experience. So can you tell me a little bit more about that? Is that something that really fits together well? Or is
I live and die by it now. I mean, so look, I have spent much of my life trying to have the perfect customer experience and designing it. And then all of a sudden we bring it out to customers and it didn't quite meet some nuance of the customer. And then we're back to the drawing board and the time to solution is forever. So Agile is really just a strategy that says we're going to constantly put things out in front of small subsets of customers. We're going to test market that stuff, and we're going to iteratively, quickly try to determine what customers really want underneath all of the things that they may say they want. And so it's fabulous to me. I literally will go into we did a Agile with a jewelry store chain, and we would ride along with the customers. We'd observe them using technology. They go left or right. Did they touch this? Did they touch that? How much time did they spend in a heat map of the store? All that. And then we talk to customers about their experience, and they would say things like, I didn't really care about touching anything. And you'd see them just touching. Or I spent no time touching products, and they were touching on the spinners, And so I think what you start to say is, okay, well, clearly that worked because we saw how much they touched, we saw how much they bought. So let's move it 5 inches over, closer to them. Oh, nope, that was a little too intrusive to their body boundary, and they bought less and they touched less. So literally you start to learn day to day, to night to morning, what is the optimal placing of that spinner, for example. And I think that's what Agile is about. It's about constantly saying, okay, let's try this. Oh, that didn't work. Let's fail forward to that. Okay, that worked. And I just love that compared to the old days where we would just observe and then decide and then implement and roll it out enterprise-wide. And I mean, I can tell you in Starbucks a long time ago, we had a carbonated coffee beverage. Everybody was sure that thing was going to work. People got sick. So yeah, I mean, it was a pretty big scale fail. So iteratively, agilely, customer experience redesign.
That's cool, and it makes me think. So one of the ways I talk to people about customer experience is to think of it like a football match. Now, to you, that's soccer, but I'm talking about the type of football you play with your feet. So it's understanding who the customer is. So in the sort of analogy of a soccer game, it's the fan. So understanding what their successful outcome is. So that's wanting to see the team win the game. And then it's saying, well, okay, then we need to understand what we need to measure within that. So that's going to be the goal. So you need to understand that you need to score more goals than the other team. Now, in the game, you're not just, if you're losing, if you're scoring less goals than the other team, you're not just going to sit back and go, well, that's our strategy. Sorry, guys, we're going to lose. You go, well, no, let's tweak things. Let's try players in different positions. Let's try a different attack. Let's try different pressures in different areas. And you're going to keep changing until you start to win. Again, it doesn't always work, but of course that's what goes on. And then if certain players aren't performing, you substitute them, you change things. You never just sit back and go, well, sorry, that's how we're going to play for the rest of the season because it's been decided. So I really like that way of thinking about it, making those little changes as you go until you find that sweet spot that is perfect for that experience. I
just want to say I could not have added anything to that. That is James 1, Joseph 0 in the scorecard.
No, not at all, man. But thank you. I appreciate that.
That's brilliantly done.
Again, another thing of I've read a lot of your stuff. Another thing of yours that I read, which I found really interesting, was about empathetic customer experience design. So, of course, we've spoken about like the tangible things, like moving a thing slightly to the left or slightly to the right, etc., which is like it's like really into the transactional side of things. But talk to me more about the empathetical sort of aspects to designing a customer experience.
Sure. So, empathic design is big, and I call it empathetic design, and the person who created the field calls it empathic design. So I've changed my languaging of it. But, empathic or empathetic design functionally means this. You can understand people very practically. I can understand what you're saying. The words that you say, I can actually share back to you and say, this is my intellectual understanding of it, right? Now let's take a step back and say, okay, you said that your car smashed the wall because the brakes didn't work. Okay, let me get that back. Your brakes didn't work and you smashed into a wall. Do I have that right? And James goes, yes, I do, from the hospital as he mumbles and casts, right? And the empathic answer is, so what now? And if that's the what, so what? So what of that, as a human being, should I understand? Well, I should understand that by not having the brakes work, you are now in a hospital and your family is, devastated with bills and the whole lot. And as a human being, I need to appreciate the impact of the what. Well, empathic design kind of does that from the front end instead of as a reaction to empathy. It is really saying, putting myself in the shoes of the customer, which means I have to take off my own shoes first, right? I have to get out of my own space. I have to say, what do I know about my customer? Let me look at their psychographic, demographics, behaviors, lifestyle preferences. Let me go there and let me try to channel my customer, their inner customer, and really walk through the same process as them, not as the business that's been pushing my product at this customer forever, but really as what it's like to receive the customer from the customer's vantage point. My probable easiest understanding of this is something that Starbucks does called the customer walk, where every day you put an employee out there to walk from the parking lot in as if they were a customer and look at the entire cafe from the customer's vantage point. We understand that in doing that, they're reactively being empathic. What if you designed it that way? If you said, let's forget about Starbucks' current iteration and design, but let's imagine we are that mom, that 28-year-old mom with one child, and they are trying to come in and get a coffee in the morning. How might we recreate this, empathizing with her current life challenges and lifestyle needs?
So,
Capiche?
Definitely. So you talk about the 28-year-old mum with a kid. How important do you think personas are when doing this stuff? Do you think that's something that's like mega important? Yeah. And how detailed do you need to get? Like, do I need to differentiate between a 27-year-old mum with one kid and a 28-year-old? Like, how do you go about?
No, not normally. Normally, no. I mean, personas are collections of groups of customers that represent large enough segments of your customer core market that you understand that your entire core market is not homogeneous. They are differentiated, but they're not so differentiated that you can't develop a unified strategy that captures a whole category of people. And so these are arts, right? It's not a science that we know how many segments, but part of it is how much can you execute against? The differentiation has to be sufficient for you to be able to understand that not everybody is monolithic, but it also can't be so sliced up that there was no way you could, is this the left-handed 27-year-old mom or the right-handed 27-year-old mom born in March? I mean, at some point, you can't execute a differentiation there. So normally people keep it to 3 or 4 very different journeys of the customer. So if I'm a first-time leaser of a Mercedes-Benz vehicle, normally that captures a whole bunch of very similar characteristic people versus somebody who's buying their 5th Mercedes-Benz, right? I mean, all of a sudden, what I'm looking for in the sales approach is qualitatively different. The orientation to the brand level is different. So you have to make it usable, both from a brand perspective, but also relevant to some important distinctions.
Well, what I find really interesting there is you're saying about, the person who's buying the Mercedes for the first time is going to be very different for the person buying the 5th one. But of course, in time, if you do your job right, the first person will become that 5th person. So is there a way to think about sort of migrating personas through those different stages?
Oh, absolutely. And great brands understand how to re-engage customers to take them into a new purchasing loop, right? So that's part of a great customer experience design. But here's one of my favorite, and this comes from Porsche. So if you are a 50-year-old guy, like me, 50 plus, and you go into a Porsche dealership, they ask you one question, right? They say, have you bought a Porsche before? And if my answer is no, everything about the cycle of selling me is around revitalization and energizing and almost creating the imagery that I am young again and virile at a level of my 20s, right? If I say yes, everything about the buying relationship goes to the distinctions and the nuances of the product today from what my last vehicle was. I love this vehicle for what I already know it to be. Tell me how the future looks extending my relationship with the brand. And you just do those kinds of things, and you drop in at points in the relationship things that will catapult people into the next opportunity to engage their relationship with your brand.
I love that because it is difficult. And the companies I work with, sometimes they're like, well, yeah, if we've got these different personas, how do we then manage different experiences? And you try and explain to them, sometimes it can be as simple as just asking a question to understand something about a customer, to then understand which path you're going to take them down. So I love that example, because not only, right, I have a bit of problem with personas. Okay, I tend not to like them, and I'll explain why. Because if you get, let's say, a persona of 50-year-old person who earns X amount per year, who lives in a particular region, who's a particular gender, who's educated to whatever. For me, that doesn't really seem very personal. But what you spoke about, you spoke beyond that. You spoke about what that actually means about the person. So when I look at it, I prefer to understand like the attributes of a person. Are they a proud person? Are they an easily frustrated person? Are they an open-minded person? Those sorts of things that really give you an idea of how to laser focus the experiences. So how important do you feel it is to understand sort of the attributes beyond the circumstantial things?
Oh my goodness, it's so important. Well, first off, one of the realities, we all carry biases about people. As soon as I see you, I go, maybe he's a rock star. I take your accent and I make some conclusions. I look at your ring. I make decisions about you immediately. The good of a persona should be to make a person more noble than less noble, right? It shouldn't put you into a tiny box where you can't escape and you're like a specimen. It really should make you to say, people who are my age, we're kind of, you could view us as a little old thinking and not as open-minded and not likely to text or whatever you want to say. But maybe if you put yourself into my shoes for a moment and realize that we had a shared set of life experiences, if you're born in the 60s versus people born in the 90s, that could cause us to have certain ways of thinking, behaving. And that's important for a context, but it's only a hypothesis, because for every single one of those people that you have a presumption about, they're going to blow your mind. I'll tell you, when I was a clinical psychologist, I was asked by a physician to go out to the emergency room and speak to this older woman whose husband had just passed away. And I'm like, Doc, you should have done this. This is really slimy. So I go out there. I'm very assuming. I say, ma'am, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but your husband just passed away. And she goes, hallelujah, brother. I could not wait for this day, right? Like, so there's this moment of going, oh my goodness. My assumptions would be this lady would be devastated. I approached with sheer trepidation, and she's doing backflips in the emergency room. And I think that we have to be willing to realize that contextually it was probably appropriate for me to operate from that initial presumption until proven otherwise. And then my response was, probably quite different. We didn't throw a party there per se. But
did she give you any sort of explanation as to why she was so happy about that?
No, but I can honestly tell you, my life was always then dedicated never to have a wife who would say the same thing upon my death. That was my goal.
But whether there's very few goals that are more noble than that. What I want to do is there's it's not so much a question, it's a comment that's come in. I'm not sure if you can see it on your, but it's a massive one. But it's talking about so of course I said earlier that when you ask a customer what they want, they will tend to say that they want the same thing but for less money. Whereas what Ricardo's saying is that, well, actually a lot of customers are saying that they're happy to pay more for a better experience, which isn't exactly the same as what I was saying, but I understand why he's saying it. What are your feelings around that, about that sort of?
Ricardo's a genius. I mean, he really is a genius, and he has data readily available. He's like a legend in our field. So he's like a sandbagger. If this is who you have watching this video, I should have never gotten on. He's brilliant. Yeah, that's absolutely true. That simplification of experiences are something that people fundamentally crave. The life is very complicated. So it also fits into some really nice persona work, right? There are those people who are organizers, and their brand persona is, look, life is too complicated. Everything's going crazy out there. Here's what I offer you. I offer a simplification of the world. I'm trying to reduce the complexity of an overly complexifying world. And I think that brands that get that, it's not just about ease, it is about decluttering and making it easy. And so that's like an insight at another level. And I think I'm done now. I can't continue after that brilliance. Thanks for the question, Ricardo. Comment.
There we go. What more do you say? Look, I suppose this is brings me to the end, really. So in the link, guys, if you're watching, there's a bunch of ways that you can get in contact with Joseph. But Joseph, for you, what's your preferred way? What's the easiest way for people to stay in touch with you?
You can normally find me fairly easy. It's Joseph Michelli. That's spelled Michelli. You can go to my website, josephmichelli.com is probably the easiest way to connect with us. But I'm on Twitter with Joseph Michelli, and I'm everywhere. I'm just like James. We're constantly out there somewhere.
Yeah, you can't go far without bumping into one of us.
Exactly.
So perfect. Look, I want to say a massive thank you for being with us today. Wicked conversation. So much really cool content that's going to get me thinking for weeks now. I want to say to the people watching, look, what I was going to say now is, hey, get my new book, buy my new book. But what I am going to say is, look, don't buy my...
You just said, get my new book, even if you didn't mean to.
Subliminally. No, but actually what I'm going to say is, right, don't buy my book, right? I'm going to make a deal with you. Go and buy one of Joseph's books. Send me evidence that you've done it, and I will send you a free e-copy of this, okay? So don't buy my one. Go and buy Joseph's book. Show me that you've actually done it, and I will send you a free e-copy. And I think that'd be really cool. Two for the price of one. Right, that's it for today. Thank you for tuning in, guys. Really happy about that. If you've got any questions after this as well, you know how to get in touch. But until next time, guys, keep on delivering that rockstar customer experience.